formally get started. Hello, welcome to our HEC Roundtable, Creating Effective Content for Virtual Learning. Today's event is brought to you by the Academy of Prosocial Learning and the Humane Education Coalition. My name is Stephanie Itle-Clark, and I'm the founder and president of the Academy of Prosocial Learning and the president-elect and board member at the Humane Education Coalition. I'll also be your moderator for today's special event. I'd like to send a huge thank you to the entire Humane Education Coalition Event Planning Committee and our panelists for making this event today possible. And of course, a big thank you to all of you from all over the world who are joining of humane education in these unprecedented times. I encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat, where you are and what it is specifically humane education, and also let us know what you're hoping to gain by attending tonight's event. Now, as I noted, we're in unprecedented times in education, and many of us have had to pivot starting this summer. They're going to offer us some really exciting options, presentations, hopefully interactive responses for solutions to planning virtual learning. Our panelists tonight are Maddie, Kristina Holvershorn from Peace Learning Center, and Adora Negron from Collegio de Medicos Veterinarios from Puerto Rico. And I also would like to note that Kristina and Peace Learning Center just were named our award winners. And of course, we have Maddie from Farm Sanctuary who won the award from HEC last year. So you are in good hands attending. All right. Our first presenter will be Maddie. Maddie Krasno is Sanctuary's senior humane educator. Prior to her 3.5 years with Farm Sanctuary, numerous sanctuaries, wildlife rehabilitation advocacy groups throughout the country and abroad. Maddie holds a master's degree in humane education through the Institute for Humane Education and bachelor's degree in zoology and child development from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Welcome, Maddie.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Do I sound okay? All right, awesome. All right, so I've got a little bit of a presentation for you here. All right, looks like we're set up. So hi everyone, I am Maddie. I'm Farm Sanctuary Senior Humane Educator. Farm Sanctuary, for those who don't know, is the nation's leading farm animal rescue and protection organization. So we care for nearly 1,000 rescued farm animals at our 2 sanctuary locations in upstate New York, Watkins Glen, and just outside of Los Angeles in California. So I'm grateful to be here and be able to share with you how we transformed our in-classroom program where educators like myself visit classrooms in our designated regions to a program that is completely online and available to classrooms nationwide. So though our programming has initially targeted students in grades 5 through 12, we now have presentation offerings for preschool through grade 4, and we also have recently launched our college program. So last spring, we began offering presentations virtually to teachers, as well as hosting live webinars, which ended up being really popular. Additionally, we actually spent the summer presenting to nearly 1,000 campers nationwide at 23 different summer camps. So, and this noticeable demand that we saw for presentations, especially for pre-K through 4, encouraged us to keep those presentations in our fall programming. We can, next. So I wanted to share with you how we kind of decided what was going to be happening in the fall in terms of what we would present. So we actually, in order to gather interest from teachers about the upcoming fall, we sent a survey this past summer to 420 of our teachers. and we received 98 responses, so a 23% response rate. So 93% of those teachers stated that they definitely would or probably would be interested in pre-recorded virtual presentations for the fall of 2020. Next. And then we also asked about live presentations, and 96% of the teachers stated they definitely would or probably would be interested in live presentations. So based on this information, we decided to host live presentations that allow for the guest presenter to interact with the students as we usually would in the classroom. And we're also in the process of recording each of our presentations, and they will all be available for anyone to see on YouTube very soon. So far this year, we have 157 presentations scheduled at 55 different schools nationwide, with many more pending. And we've already presented to almost 200 students so far. Next. So following our presentations, teachers and camp counselors are asked to fill out surveys about the effectiveness of the presentation and whether they would recommend it to another teacher. And their feedback has been extremely positive, and I'm hoping that having a chance to glance this over, you get some idea of what is appealing to these teachers. So their feedback, they've been highlighting the students' positive reactions to the lessons, the age appropriateness of each presentation's content, the various methods that we use to share this information. So whether it's visual, storytelling, activities, student participation, and more. And next, we've got a few more. So teachers and camp counselors were also pleased about the discussions that were prompted and took place following the presentations, which is something we like to see. And our overall success with holding the students' attention, which I know is a big concern for everyone. Next. So just last week, I presented to 4 classes of 6th graders in Arizona. The teacher had been sharing with me how difficult it was to keep her students focused during these unusual times. Following the presentations, this is the note that she wrote to me. Your presentation was great. The kids actually responded. It's been really difficult engaging students with online teaching, but they were definitely engaged today. So how exactly are we engaging students? Next. So at Farm Sanctuary, we believe that one of the most compelling ways to reach young people and adults alike is through storytelling. By sharing the stories of individual farmed animals and their transformations, people come to view these animals differently and ultimately want to protect them. Next. While animal stories have historically been the backbone of most of our presentations, we're also offering presentations that focus more on the environment and social justice now. So whatever the focus may be, we're always incorporating captivating photography, like this beautiful photo of Frank here, and as well as helpful graphics that illustrate the issues of our food system in a digestible way. Next. So for example, this is one of the graphics that we had designed. Graphics are a great tool for depicting issues that may otherwise be fairly upsetting in a photograph. So this enables us to introduce younger children to issues in an age-appropriate way. Next. For younger students, grades K through 4, art activities have become integral to our presentation format. So whether learning about the animals who call Farm Sanctuary home or the impacts that animal farming has on the environment, students for both of these presentations, they're following along with an educator as they bring this learning to life through art, as you're seeing in these images here. On the right, you're seeing a student actually holding up a coloring page that we also had created. So we've created a couple coloring pages that we then send to parents or teachers afterwards that students can work on. Next. We also created worksheets along with their answers that students can reflect on, so students can reflect on what they've learned. So, and with both of these, we encourage students with their parent and guardian's permission to actually send their artwork or pictures of their worksheets to us, as you see here, so that we can evaluate student participation and their interest in the presentation's content. All right, next. So for older students, grades 5 and up, our traditional way of asking students to reflect on the presentation's content was to give each student a sticky note and ask them to anonymously respond to a prompt. We have since adapted this anonymous reflection to become a Google form like you see here. So students are asked their grade and their state, just so we've got some kind of data to analyze. And then we ask them what their main takeaways from the presentation, as well as if there's any actions that they would like to take following the presentation. We share this survey in the chat at following the presentation. Next. So these are just some examples of students' reflections. They cover many topics and issues such as the treatment of animals, social justice, and the impacts that animal agriculture has on the environment. Students are often inspired to take action after learning about issues of our food system, and they're consistently asking us, what can they do to help? So we encourage students to keep learning and researching these issues themselves, and to consider eating a more plant-based diet. Next. We also introduce them to 3 youth organizations that are mobilizing for change and giving young people a sense of community around these issues. So one of them is Farm Sanctuary's very own Youth Leadership Council, which you're seeing a bunch of our members in the top image. And then there's also the Youth Climate Save Movement and the Raven Corps. Next. So these reflections ultimately show how visibly moved students are by Farm Sanctuary's presentations. And I think they really show the power of spending just 20, 30, 40 minutes with students and how that can positively change their minds and behavior forever. This is one of my favorite reflections that I have ever received. And this was actually last week from the 6th graders in Arizona. Oh, and it says, I never knew I cared about, or I cared so much about animals. All right, next. So that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with you a little more about Farm Sanctuary's virtual programming, and I look forward to answering your questions during the Q&A.
All right, thank you so much. I may need a picture of the pig in a jacket to hang in my office. That was amazing.
Sure, of course. That's George.
Oh, and even better, right? All right, so that was great. I'm sure a lot of us got some good ideas about how we can engage students. I'm sure you're looking forward to asking Maddie questions. If you don't want to forget questions as a presenter is speaking, please put them in the chat. I know we have a lot of questions, but we will do our best to get as many as we can completed. All right, so we're on to our second speaker. Christina Holverson is the Director of Restorative and Humane Programs at Peace Learning Center and is the Indianapolis Program Manager for HEART. She's been a teacher in general and special education settings and has worked with elementary, middle, and high school students. She taught in Indianapolis Public Schools and Chicago Public Schools. She co-directs a climate camp in the summers, creates humane education learning tools, and is a trainer and practicer of restorative justice. She's the creator of Be the Change, a humane education museum housed at Peace Learning Center, and is the author of Secret of the Troublemakers. She received her master's in humane education from the Institute of Humane Education, and she lives with her husband, 2 human children, and 4 non-human children, 3 dogs and a cat, in Indianapolis, Indiana. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you so much. So as my presentation is coming up, you can hear that I've worked, I have 2 very kind of distinct jobs. I work with adults with my work with Peace Learning Center primarily, and then I do a lot of work with kids through particularly with Climate Camp. And I thought, let me just take one sort of case study of how we transitioned a program that was totally what I thought was fully reliant on this beautiful setting that we have. We're housed in a city park that's just huge and beautiful and wonderful. We'll move to the next slide. And next. Okay, so most of our camp, we're sharing local plant-based food together. The kids are super fun. There's lots of, you know, fun interpersonal stuff happening. And so the thought of having to do it virtually, I will just fully admit that I was a bit of a curmudgeon about. I thought, it's not going to be the same. I don't know if we can even do this, you guys. And so so Climate Camp is a project of Peace Learning Center, Heart, and also Earth Charter Indiana. And so we have a lot of really interested people that kind of come together, and we have this super fun and interactive camp. And so we'll go to the next slide. This is a little screenshot of one of the kids at the end of Climate Camp. She's making a joke, I'm going here forever, like when I'm 20. And she's, I think she was in 3rd grade. So she was just like, I don't want to leave. And they loved it. They were, I think, just as enthusiastic about a virtual camp as they were about the in-person camp. So here I am thinking that the best we have to offer is you know, this friendliness, all these friendships and this beautiful scenery, but they still got so much out of it. So I just wanted to share a few themes that I kind of picked up from our work this summer in our climate camp. So it's a 2-week camp, and we'll advance to the next slide. And really a couple things, just large overarching themes. We had to focus on fun. We had to make this fun. We started off with, you know, people were telling strange jokes. The co-founder is a guy named Jim Poyser, and he just put on one of those like wrestling masks and just looked. And I was like, way to go, Jim, for not making this an awkward start. He just like, you know, kind of sat there. And so it was this just kind of fun, light, you know, lots of silliness. And we had to start with relationships. So that's my advice for any kind of work we're doing with people. How can we connect and find some kind of commonality or connection? And so we started with a group code, and you can call that sort of rules, you can call it boundaries, you can call it anything you want. But our group code was what the kids needed to decide on how they were going to interact with one another, how we were going to use Zoom as a tool. And I just think that was a really helpful thing to start with. I do that with in-person groups, but it's even more important probably for virtual groups. How are we going to use the chat feature? Are we going to, you know, and I'm sure, you know, you've got lots of different ways of talking about how kids can and cannot use the chat feature, but they did a really nice job with it. One of the kids just said, can we use it as a tool, not a toy? And I thought that was a really useful frame, just to say this is a tool if we're communicating, but it's not a toy. So we're not going to make fun of each other. We're not going to do, you know, silly stuff, but it's okay to use as a tool to keep engaged. And I do think it is important for them to still have a way to communicate and connect with one another, because that's what a lot of kids and a lot of adults are missing right now. So we'll keep going. And we had a lot of small group work. So we kind of divided our camp days in half, and half of the time was spent in a full group and the rest of the time was spent in small groups. And kids could choose what they were the most interested in. So I'm always a big advocate of student choice. They know what they're interested in and they know what they're passionate about. And so we had a group doing artwork. We had a group really trying to figure out how they could communicate, move their message. And I'm going to show you an example of that at the end of this presentation. We had a group interested in advocacy, and they wrote some really compelling letters to our governor and to some of our legislators. We had a group interested in education, so figuring out how they could get their teachers more compelled to teach climate. And then we had a group who covered science, and those were the kids who really needed hands-on things. There's lots of fun you know, kinds of ways that they could, we do climate change in a jar. There's lots of fun ways we can hands-on learn about the science. So this was just a picture of one of the presentations coming from the education group. So talking about when you get back to school, you can start a green team. Here's what our green team looked like. And so just sharing some of the cool stuff that kids are doing. And they really did a nice job of connecting with each other's work, because it was easier to focus on that. So there's this strange thing that kind of happens where we're actually able to slow down and focus a little bit more because we are, you know, learning virtually. Okay, we'll keep on going. And so I just think the more variation, the better. So you may have a really awesome intention, and if it goes too long, as you guys can tell, if I'm talking too long right now, you kind of space out. And so we did so many, this is a video they're these ACE videos. Climate, I'll type in what it is when I can remember it, but they're fantastic. Kids love them, and they're a really, I think it's Alliance for Climate Education. They have these amazing videos that really kind of put the pieces together. We had music going, we had their songs, the kids were really interested in what they could do at home right now. And so we did a lot of cooking videos. They were really interested in how you can cook plant-based foods at home that are, low carbon footprint kind of foods. So gardening, we had somebody take the camera out and show their garden. I'm really interested in sprouting, so I made kind of a tongue-in-cheek video called Sproutin' with Tina. And I had music in the background, and the kids thought it was so funny. They thought for some reason, those kids really understand my silly sense of humor, and they really enjoyed it. And they also grew and ate sprouts, so it was a win-win. And so as much as variation as you can think of, and when you, especially with younger kids, my daughter is in pre-K, and one of them, and I see her teacher constantly using videos and songs, and that is the way to bring them back. So if you can have an arsenal of tools like that, just to keep them interested in between other kinds of things, that works well for young learners. Okay, next. And so one of the things that was the most successful, I would say, this year was we really just said, hey, to our youth leaders, so kids who are probably older than, I would say, maybe 5th grade, you're doing a presentation on this cool thing that you did, so we just put them, in this position of saying, share what you did. And so this is one of our kids speaking at his local city council, and he is a really great orator. And we said, why don't we just ask Ben to explain, how he, did this? How did he find that bravery? How did he practice? And he was amazing. And it's so much more interesting to hear a peer talking about that than it would to hear me lecturing about, you have a voice, kids, you can say it. So so just asking, and the relationships are so solid with the kids who've been in this camp for years. We could ask them to do anything and they would at least try it. So, kids feel very flattered to be asked to do anything and to be asked to be leaders. And so you'll be surprised if you know a kid who has never done something like this before. Doesn't hurt to ask. Say, if you've got a middle or a high schooler, would you be willing to help me present to some younger kids? I bet you they would take you up on it. Okay, so we'll go next. This was one of our youngest learners, and he was so interested in the art group, and he was doing comic strip graphic novels, and it was the sweetest thing. He was so interested in the concepts, and he was totally able to translate them in a meaningful way with this really engaging comic strip. And the other kids just adored him. He was this really young little guy, and they really cared for him and encouraged this kind of thing. So if you can get kids busy and active and making something. So all of the groups were responsible for presenting something at the showcase at the end of our camp. And so our interest was twofold. Keep them busy, because we know that busy hands, they're really learning, but also we can use a lot of those things to promote and move our message afterwards. And so one of the other ones is a video that we put together that was pretty cute, but it was a really nice way just to have sort of an end. You're going to create this. One of the kids created a website. Some of the kids created some really tangible communications to their schools and plans for once they're back in school, their green teams, things like that. So if you can come up with a way to get kids engaged and doing something, it is really the very best way, in my experience, to keep them engaged. We'll go next. So our science group, they got these kits, and our camp was mostly local, so it was, here are the kits, parents come pick them up. If transportation is an issue, we've got some volunteers who will take them to you. But we also did some projects with stuff that you may have around your house. And so this was just one of those things. They grew sprouts, they did climate change in a jar, they did all kinds of cool stuff. A pollinator count, that's something you could always do. So we really dug deep to try to think of things that kids could actually do, and better yet, if you can get outside and do it and observe nature and interact with nature. Okay, next. So this is a video that one of our campers made. She's really passionate about dogs, and she's really passionate about climate change. So she got to thinking, what do you think dogs and cats might think about if they were talking about climate change? So it's really quick, and it has subtitles because it's a little difficult to hear.
What are you doing? It's hot in here. Yeah, but turning on the air conditioner is bad for climate change. You don't really believe in that stuff, do you? What stuff? Science? I'm saying climate change isn't real. Wait, so you don't think the planet is warming, or do you think humans didn't cause it? Huh? Because the average surface temperature of the Earth has risen, the temperatures of the ocean has risen, the Earth's ice sheets are melting, snow cover and glaciers are shrinking, sea levels are rising. Fine, but don't blame humans. Look, I literally love humans more than anything, but they totally are the ones causing this. How do you know? I couldn't become a climate scientist because they don't let dogs into college, but 97% of climate scientists agree that humans are causing this. How do they know? Because the more carbon we put into our atmosphere from coal, oil, and gas, the higher the temperatures are going. I mean, scientists everywhere would tell you this. The only charts I care about are the ones that show what time humans feed me. I love that chart too. I'm gonna give you a few things to read.
So we let go and let kids create something fun, and they come up with cool stuff like that. So yeah, I wanted to wrap that up, that, you know, leave some room for creativity. Kids are amazing with technology. I mean, we had kids really creating their own websites, and they're very motivated that even though you're stuck at home, you can actually make a difference and change things. And that when you make something like a video or something like a website, we can share that and promote it and really move your message. And kids really get that and are motivated by that. So thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer questions about kid stuff, but also I do more adult stuff than I wish I did. So, so I'll be open to those kinds of questions too.
Great. Wow. Thank you. I mean, I think that video is exactly what I needed after a long day of work. And if it is not yet posted on the internet, I think it could. You need to get that out there. That's amazing.
I'll send it to you guys. There's somebody asking for it, and we're happy to share it far and wide. So yeah.
All right, so we have one more presenter before we open up to the panel discussion, and that we want that to be really interactive. All right, so we will next be hearing from Adora Negron. In 2006, she began working at the Humane Society of Puerto Rico as an adoption counselor and educator, where she developed an education program. And she was working with her rescue dog Emmett by her side, and they visited hundreds of schools, camps, and other groups. In 2012, Adora developed a humane education program for Juntos Vieques on a small island off the east coast of Puerto Rico. During this time, she completed her studies with the Academy of Prosocial Learning, and she became the first certified humane education specialist in Puerto Rico. So congratulations, Adora. The Collegio de Medicos Veterinarios de Puerto Rico currently shares her vision of inspiring humane values and pro-social behavior through education. Despite the earthquakes and pandemic, her pilot program was launched in January of 2020 in 2 public elementary schools. The program provides weekly humane education lessons. The program is going strong and expanding now to more schools after her teacher webinars reached hundreds of educators around Puerto Rico. During the summer, 125 students virtually participated in their Kind Week camp. Adora is giving the final touches to her K to 6th grade humane education curriculum and hopes it will be used in Spanish-speaking countries around the world. So welcome, Adora.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and seeing so many people interested in developing their own programs. I know that some of you presenters will have a little bit of different dynamics because I'm working actually with the Department of Education, and this it's a weekly program. So I guess we're battling with the current situation where we have like 20% of kids or even more that haven't even received classes yet, and teachers are trying to get to them. They're printing and getting the models at their homes. So we've had to adapt to everything that's going on with the Department of Education here in Puerto Rico. But we're doing it. We actually have 3 schools that are fully on board, 3 elementary schools, and they get weekly lessons virtually. Some of them, we have different kind of, I'm sorry, my first language is Spanish, so I think everything in Spanish first. But we're combining strategies to get to each and every kid in these schools. So you can pass the slide. So we've been doing different kind of things. We started since we were affected by the earthquakes and then the pandemic. So we had to adjust to this virtual learning. And we started putting crafts and activities up on our website. Usually they were written, but we also did some video tutorials. Well, basically I would record the tutorials at home with my daughters. I had them working overtime. And that was a hit. It was posted on Facebook and on the website. We had live presentations for children where we would have them connect at different ages, and the presentations were interactive because they were like games. Then we had the teacher presentations, and that's how we got more teachers on board to have the actual program in their schools, because they kept on saying, oh, we want the program, but they wanted the in-person program. So that's actually good that we went virtual, because I can only be in 2 schools because I'm the only Humane educator at the Collegio. So being virtual, I can reach more students, which is sort of good. The virtual classrooms, like the one you're seeing in the back, they're created with Google Slides. I love it. It's one of my favorite tools. You can actually put everything you want to do in a virtual classroom. So you can reach more students that maybe still can't connect to Teams or can't use Zoom, but they can use their phone and just go into these PDFs that I think are really great. During the summer, we had the Kindly Camp, which was totally virtual, and we had a combination of things. We had actually Maddie was in came to our camp. That was really cool. So we combined short meetings, because I know that I was thinking, you know, summer, you're supposed to be out, you're supposed to be, I've done 3 summer camps before, and all we had was games and running around and going on kayaks and all this kind of stuff and being on the computer. So we tried to minimize the time. And most of the parents were actually happy with that, because they didn't want their kids online all day, like other camps, virtual camps were doing. So we actually had short sessions to just talk about what we were doing, what did you like, do you have any questions, and basically say goodbye and connect later on. So that worked for us pretty well. And now we're doing the virtual learning, distance learning, because we're also working with printed out material and a combination of strategies. Next slide. So I think we've covered a lot of what we can do, but I have some suggestions of things to consider when you're creating the content, because we've had ups and downs. This is new for all of us, and we've made mistakes, and we've seen what works and what doesn't. We had reviews during the summer camp. Most of them were super. And some of them some wanted the kids to be connected more time, and some were really happy with the little time that they were on. So basically, considering everything that went on camp, these are my suggestions. So the length of the lessons or activities, we'll try to cut them to half of the time, so that they're not online so much and they don't get bored. So think of this as a 5-year-old, being for half an hour, they really get lost in all the process. So we're cutting it down to maybe 15 minutes. Some have been even 10 minutes. So just try not to think that you need to do a complete lesson. Try to cut it in half. Simple content. Sometimes we want to put too much content into too many topics into one. Like if you're talking about overpopulation, we'll just try to stick to basic things, like don't mix in too many topics that are related, because try to keep it short and simple. The age groups, usually we divided it from 4 to 7 years, 8 to 12, and 13 to 18, and it worked pretty good. When we use the virtual classrooms, what we try to do is mix in different kind of content that maybe an 18-year-old wouldn't like it, but the 13-year-old would. So by having a lot of different kind of content in the virtual classrooms, well, they can just, skip what they don't really want to do, but they have other options that they might be more interested in. Think of the teacher's needs. Now, at least here we're having a particular situation. Some teachers, they don't have the materials. The Department of Education isn't giving, what they actually need. So they got a lot of load on them already to be saying, hey, you want to do humane education? Give me your classroom once a week, or let's do this with them. It's a work overload. So we want to make it easier for them. So ask them, what can we do? Can we do virtual classrooms? Can we do live presentation once a week, once a month? Just consider what the teacher actually needs. Relevant content. Well, if we're in Puerto Rico, well, let's try to keep it on the topics that is relevant to them. And representation and diversity to me is so important, because when you're creating, let's say, slides, and you're creating a live presentation, when you start looking for images, and I'm sure you've all had this happen, you see a certain kind of person, or you see a certain kind of group. So we're trying to have these kids represented, that they can actually identify with what they're seeing. If we're having interviews, people that they can identify with, and all that diversity that we just really need right now. So looking for images on the internet is kind of tough. And for me, it's pretty important that they feel represented in what they're seeing, because it's gonna captivate them a little bit more. And basically they need interactive music, animations, questions, props, games, whatever you can do. I mean, the other day I was with a kindergarten group, and I had this kid that didn't want to say hello to me. And the teacher kept on, hey, let's say hi to the new teacher. And all I did was pop in a little cat ears and started scratching at the screen. And that kid was totally engaged the 15 minutes I was there. So, these little details that get at least the little kids, but they're really important when you're just looking across the screen. We need to reach them. Also, when I make a presentation, I always talk about one of my pets. That really gets the ice broken, and I have a lot of them, so I have a lot of options to keep on going. Next slide. So for virtual meetings, you can use Teams, Zoom, or GoToMeeting, any of them. Meetings to just check in, like we did in the summer camp, that we actually I think we only did one arts and crafts online, because I couldn't get to record it, because most of the content was recorded. But meetings just to check in, did you like what you saw? Do you want to show me what you did? We had poems, we had them writing raps, which is really cool. We had a talent show. So you can do different things, and you don't have to have them all day online if it's, if you have the chance to, because most of the time we only have like one period with them. Interactive presentations with PowerPoint. I can show you on the other slide. Use a lot of animations. I try to ask them questions and then eliminate the drawings that or the images that don't answer the question. So try to make it pretty animated. So you can do talks and games and puppet shows. I love puppet shows, and sometimes they look kind of cheesy the way we're doing it, but I think they like it. The book readings, well, that has a lot of copyright thing involved, but if you do have the copyright to it, well, that is an option too. special guests. They're gonna get tired of looking at you all the time. So maybe invite someone over to join in the virtual meeting, like a veterinarian or a shelter worker, or we had guardabosques. I don't know how you say that, the forest keepers. I don't know how you say that in English, I forgot. So you can do arts and crafts and have the tours, the virtual tours, and just go around the shelter or any other place that you actually have access to. Next slide. So the interactive presentations, which was what we started out with, and we loved it. And most of the kids that took these interactive presentations were actually in the summer camp. So it's basically slides, but you make it a game. So you ask, hey, can you touch this cat? Do you think it's okay to pet him? And then the next slide will say no. And we also have the yes. These are mostly for the for the smaller students, but it works really well. Have them take off the mic, or they can make symbols and show you on the camera and try to get them, or thumbs up, thumbs down, and just have them interacting with the presentations. This was a game where you would ask them, what is the object that your pet doesn't need? So we would have them answer, and then the shoes would just zoom out. So that's the way to make the presentations more interactive. Next slide. So we use a lot of pre-recorded videos, which we actually put in the virtual classrooms. To make the videos, I'm using OpenShot Video Editor, which is free, and it's very easy. I mean, and actually the videos that we've made, like I just make them with my cell phone. Actually, we had some that were paid for by professional camera recording. I'm sorry, but we actually had better reviews of the ones that I actually just took with my phone. They said that they loved the integration of my family, seeing my pets, seeing where I live. I guess it's more personal. So you don't have to go all out and pay for somebody to make a professional video. You can just, do it in the OpenShot and put some music with YouTube Library, because they have free music that you don't have to, all you have to do is, I think, write the name of the author. Each song has its own copyright rules. So recording, record the lessons. You can put them up on your virtual platform, like if you're using Microsoft Teams. The good thing is that they're accessible at any time. So if you can't actually meet them with Zoom or the virtual meetings, and you can have these pre-recorded videos that you can just send by email, or you can upload them. I used Edmodo for the summer camp, which was really easy. You just upload the videos. Or if you have kids that actually don't have internet connection, we have some teachers that are actually sending the videos by WhatsApp. So there's really any way to do it, or just link them up to YouTube channel. Next. Okay, so I don't know if it's my computer that's slow or. So this is basically the virtual classroom. It's created from scratch. And if you don't have experience with the virtual classroom, so everything that you touch is interactive. Well, anything that you want to be interactive is interactive. So if you touch the chicken, it'll take you to a chicken video. Or if you touch the computer, you'll have a tutorial. And usually I use the Bitmoji, and that's where you'll receive the topic of the day and a little introduction to where you're going to look for the elements in your virtual classroom. This is very easy to share even on WhatsApp or through email, because these are PDF files, which are very easy to share with the teachers or upload them to any platform that you're using. You create them with Google Slides. There's a lot of tutorial online. Next slide. So I can't forget those that actually don't have computers. Like I said, we have children here that haven't even been able to begin their classes. Teachers are even taking the material to their houses because we just don't have any other way. And this population shouldn't be forgotten. They are really important, and I think they can benefit so much from this material. So printing out individual handouts, or creating an activity book. At least we're working with a curriculum that's for a semester. So just any topic that we're going to be working on, print out something, or with the older kids, you can have a newsletter and have different content and different topics included in that newsletter. And at least here we take it to the school, and on Fridays, anybody that's going to pick up just picks it up at the school. So that's useful for those who can't connect online. I think that's it. Let's see the next slide. Yes. So there's my contact. Basically, you can get on Facebook anything if you're interested in knowing what the Collegio of Medicos Veterinarios is doing. It's in Spanish, but I know we have Spanish speakers in the meeting. And on the website of the Collegio, we also have some virtual classrooms that you can check out if you want to, and tutorials for manualidades, arts and crafts. So thanks. Let's see what questions you have.
Wow, thank you so much. And Adora, I know you started this project before the pandemic pivot that we all had to do. So I feel like you've done so much, and I look forward to the questions that we're going to get about it.
And never take the last one.
So
With the $5 grande
just
lunches
been
box from Taco Bell,
unmuted.
you can break all the rules.
So
'cause this meal's
if everyone's just been unmuted, so just in case you happen to be in a place that you don't want us to hear what's going on, you can mute yourself. We want to open it up to questions. And everyone does have a little virtual hand that they should be able to put up. I don't, yes, if you open up the click the participant or near your name, there's a little thing that says raise hand. So I don't know if everyone can see where that is, but I have my little virtual hand raised, and then I can lower it, right? Very good, Lisa, awesome. I can see you have a hand up, right? So feel free to practice raising your virtual hand. You can also type your questions into the chat if you can't find your virtual hand, or if you just would rather type your questions in. Plus, we have some questions that have been previously submitted. So the rest of our time, we want to have a discussion. And if you have an answer for some of these questions as well that you think would be a great addition, we do want to hear from you as well. We can all learn so much from each other right now as we're changing our programs for youth and adults. Let me pull up our first question. Now this question is going to be for all three of our presenters. There are a lot of platforms out there. Some of them are free, some of them have a small cost, some have a large cost. So what platform have you found that works best? That's the first part of the question. So I don't know which of the three of you want to start with that, Christina, Maddie, or Adora?
Sure, and this is just very personal. I think Zoom is a little more user-friendly and less glitchy. Microsoft Teams is what my own children are using, and I swear they conspire to make things tougher than they need to be. So I've had a lot of trouble with that, just lots of like kids getting kicked out, nobody can log in, things like that. So Zoom has been very easy. I've also used GoToMeeting and it's okay, but I think how easy Zoom is, that's my personal preference.
Yeah, so I will say, and this might be helpful, most of the teachers that we present to seem to be using Zoom. So that we're pretty much using whatever they want us to use in terms of us going and presenting to them. I do like Zoom. The one thing that's nice about Zoom that doesn't seem to be the case with the other platforms is that if you are dependent on your notes, you can't hide them in the other platforms. So like if you create a presentation and you want to be able to have your notes there, Zoom is the only one where you can do that as far as I can tell. So that makes Zoom kind of nice.
We use Zoom, but now the Department of Education is having them use Microsoft Teams, so we're really, we don't have the option. I do have one teacher that isn't using Teams, so I guess she has some kind of arrangement, but most of them are using Microsoft Teams, which I honestly do not understand at all. I just get the invitation and work with it. But also, as far as non-virtual platforms like the meetings, we use Edmodo during the summer, and it was really cool because we can put the PDFs of the virtual classrooms available as assignments, and I could see which kids were going into the virtual classrooms, and you have like a forum where they can just log in every day and write a message. So I really like that motto pretty much. And it's free, which is great.
Do any of our attendees have any platforms that they use that they really like? So you can raise your virtual hand or type it in. No? Okay, sounds like a lot of us are starting with Zoom and yes, moving to Teams. Brianna, did you have a platform?
Yeah, for us, we use Zoom predominantly. I work at Posado Safe Haven outside of Seattle in Washington State. And we've been using Zoom mostly, but we've also found that Facebook Live has been a really fun way. And again, that's not like scheduling with a classroom, it's more like spontaneous. But Facebook Live has brought in a ton of engagement. So we've been doing sanctuary circle time. So it's geared towards kids and it's on a weekly basis. So we have a schedule with that, and we kind of have a following that will stop in and participate. And we'll have different topics surrounding empathy or compassion, or maybe it'll be like eating the rainbow, something like that. And we found that tends to get a lot of viewers. So that's been a really fun way that's a little different, that doesn't require quite as much communication and coordination with teachers and parents.
Nice. Before the summer, there's one other platform that I know some schools were using. As Adora mentioned, we know that there are some students that don't have access to the internet. So there were some schools who were partnering with local TV stations, and they were pushing lessons out that way. So they were doing like short morning programming based on some of their required curriculum or topics that they wanted the kids to learn. They couldn't assess it, but I thought it was a really inventive way for them to at least try to reach some of the kids who didn't have access to any online content. So if you have any contacts with local television stations, that could be an option to at least get your message out there, with limited feedback, unfortunately, though. A second question that's related to that is, how are any of you reaching adults virtually right now?
My situation might be a little unique. My other work, we just have people registering for workshops, and they pay money for workshops. It seems ridiculous to me that people keep paying money to sit on a screen, but they do it. Our workshops are awesome. That's not what I mean. So it's tough to, I always think people will have a hard time doing it, but we just do registration through Constant Contact and do all these workshops on Zoom, and it's a pretty easy process. But I do think the idea of using Facebook probably to garner some of that interest and I thought Brenna's idea was a really good one, to get people more interested in your topic might be a good way to proceed your actual presentations.
So when you said they're doing professional development, is this something that they are doing through work, or is this something that they're choosing to do?
A little of both. And that's a lot in my restorative justice realm. So yeah, people are just interested in the topic and are doing some through work. So some people have to, and other people just have to just find it and are interested in learning more.
Okay, great. Do any of our other attendees do outreach to adults? Because I know that that's also of interest to a fair number of attendees here.
Well, we were doing the webinars, the live webinars, mostly for educators to get them on board with human education, trying to get more people certified, and kind of actually know what humane education is. So those were really great, and they gave way to more schools interested in the program. So even the webinars that we had for ages 13 to 18, we had a very large adult audience, and they were really happy with it too. So basic topics like animals in your community, bite prevention, and all those, a lot of adults were registered in those.
And for the adults who were not, because I know when you're working with the Department of Education, Adora, that's professional development. So you're not charging the teachers for that. For the other workshops, are you charging anything? Or are those free?
No, everything was free. Even the summer camp was free. We're actually haven't charged for anything.
And in the chat, I don't know if everyone sees that Stephanie Campbell says that their organization uses a Facebook group to share activities, videos, and content with the parents and the teachers. So there's some outreach to adults there. Before we move on to the next question, most of you know that the Academy of Prosocial Learning does work mostly with adults, right? We're training individuals to go out into the community to work with others. So we use virtual platforms. We use something called Digital Chalk. It's a learning management system. I really enjoy it. It's very user-friendly. It's very intuitive. It keeps student records. It has a student information system built in. If you've ever used Blackboard, it's like Blackboard, but a lot less expensive. We actually see a growing number of adults who are interested in taking the online professional development, like Christina was saying. So if there's something that you're getting requests for, you may want to look into creating a very inexpensive workshop that they could attend and get professional development credits for, or hours, or even just a certificate. A lot of people like to be able to say that they attended a class and they have a certificate in that topic now. All right, so for our presenters, we have a question about implementing virtual education for very early learners, for like early childhood education. So how is that working? What are some good tips that you have used?
I can talk a little bit about one of our programs. So as I said, there was quite a bit of demand for programs for young children, especially with just young children home and wanting to occupy them with something. So we created a pre-K through first grade presentation. One of our educators wrote a couple songs that are based on farm sanctuary, what we do. One of them's down on the farm. So the students are kind of able to get it and sing along. And then she also created her own puppets and made a puppet show. And this program is being requested a lot. It's been very successful, and she's often telling me that students are up and dancing and clapping along as she gives this presentation. It's about 15 minutes, 2 little stories about some of the rescued animals at Farm Sanctuary, and then a couple songs. So something as simple as that, but what's really powerful about it is that these stories they're much deeper than, even though there's not a lot, she's not saying a whole lot about the stories. For example, she's explaining how a rescued cow who was rescued with her baby adopted a cow that was a baby that was rescued without his mother. And she tells that story, and it's very sweet. So it's a pretty magical way of getting humane education across to the little ones. And then of course, art.
Yeah, that's what I would have said. Just if you've got a tangible thing, if it's a song, if it's something that you can have kids participate, if you call it a craft and like craft out of recycled materials that anybody has at home kind of thing, kids really gravitate towards that. And I also really like what Maddie said. Don't think you have to create some huge curriculum. Do something small, start with that, see what resonates with kids.
We did pre-recorded videos, like as simple as interacting with a dog. What can you do? What you shouldn't do? We did we recorded my daughters having a conversation. Oh, can I touch your dog? And just simple, having her touch the dog in the correct way. Using a lot of stuffed animals and making them talk, and kids love it. I mean, sometimes you think, oh, this is really cheesy or this looks kind of weird, but they, I've done the test with people that I know, and I send it to them and I say, hey, is this cheesy or is this really cute? And oh, I love it. So simple things make a big difference.
Lori, you've been very patient in waiting with your little virtual hand up. So would you like to ask us your question? Oh, her little virtual hand's down. Okay, so I don't know if her internet kicked out and we lost her. All right, well, if she comes back, we'll ask that. All right, so now we'll go to a question from Ingrid, and this will actually, we have two questions that are very similar. Obviously, things like liability insurance and, legal issues have changed. So the question is to all three of the presenters. The first question is, did you have any changes to your liability insurance to cover any incidents that may happen in the home while participants are using kits that you supplied? And did you have to change your liability waiver in any way? So let's start there.
I put it in the chat, but we did not change the waiver. We did just talk to the insurance folks and just say, hey, this is what it is. And I can't even tell you if that was a discount or more, but our waiver was broad enough that it was just covered that anything that would happen during camp would, you would not hold us liable, things like that. So we kept that one broad and left it alone.
I don't know that I have anything to add to that.
Okay, all right.
Kits that are used. So yeah, I don't think I've got an answer for that one.
The second part of kind of the more operational side of things is when you're creating your recorded sessions, how do you handle things like using materials like books, songs, videos that may belong to other people when you're kind of giving a session?
Well, I can talk a little bit about so for us, it would be photography that is included. So we err on the side of being very, very careful. So that means that we're not going to use anything that we don't have the rights to use, especially if something is being recorded. It's out there, you can't take it back. So that being said, understanding, like even with stock images, this was something I recently learned. Just because you can purchase something off of one of those stock image sites does not mean that even they have all the rights they need to be selling that photo. So for example, if you purchase a photo with someone in the picture and that person didn't sign something saying you can use my photo, you might have purchased that photo and think that you have the rights to use it, but that person might see that photo at some point and go, that's not okay with me. So this is something to look into and keep in mind that, ultimately the chances may be very slim that something could happen, but it's probably not worth the risk. So that being said, making sure you understand these liability issues and trying to come up with your own content is always great. I mean, a lot of what we're using is our own images of farm animals, but when we move into social justice and the environment, that could be tricky. Again, why we use a lot of graphics that we have made, because then they belong to us. So it's a very big topic, that's for sure, but that's just a little bit of information on that.
Yeah, and if it's same here, if it's recorded, we're definitely not using anybody else's, especially books, unless we have explicit permission. And we tend to use a lot of, for imagery, Google Creative Commons. If you look there, there's some stuff that is like no license, no problem kind of thing. And so that's a little bit easier. Technically, it might be in that same category that Maddie was describing, but that's what we've tended to do.
Maddie, thank you for bringing up the photo rights, because it is true. Even though you may be able to purchase it for a one-time use, many of the photos have different types of availability, right? One might be a one-time use, slightly higher price is going to give you, or a different photo is going to give you access to, for example, make a billboard out of it. Yeah. So the liability for this is something I think all of our groups need to be very careful with. And I promised the presenters I would bring up the books, because many of us want to use books in our programs. And so a good rule of thumb is, if you're doing a live streaming session like we are now, right? It's not going to be recorded. It's not going to be put up in a public place. Then you're fine to, play a song, you're fine to read a book. But if you're recording it and you're going to be using it over and over again, then that is probably breaking copyright law. You do not want to record a book and make it readily accessible, because basically then you're getting into the livelihood for the publisher, for the illustrator, for the author, things like that. And I think as educators, that's probably our slipperiest area, because we like to use books. You can get publisher permission. For example, I know Who Changed You and Griffin Press have been absolutely fantastic during the pandemic, and they have been allowing groups who do humane work to record their books, as long as they basically agree that once we all go back to live sessions, those things are taken down. So I would recommend reaching out to those two groups, and that's Who Changed You Publishing and the Griffin Press, if you do want to use any humane education books that are in their libraries. So the next question, and there's so many of them coming in, but there are questions about how any of your groups are putting together content that you might be able to charge for, because a lot of different organizations are now seeing limited budgets. They used to get money for field trips or for going into schools. So are any of you charging? And if not, do you have plans to, and how will you make that work? Christina, is your group charging?
So Heart, for most of our programs, we don't charge anything. Most of that's free of charge. One, though, collective project, the Everyday Circle cards. So that's a deck of cards that we made. There's 180 of them, one for every day of the school year, and they're intended to give you humane education topics and equity topics and things that you could sort of lead your class through, social emotional learning, things like that. We are charging for those. Those are, we sell them as PDFs. And so that is one thing that I think a lot of people are interested in. If I could buy something in a PDF, get it sent, I don't have to deal with anything, physical. If there is something, you'd be surprised that some of the content you've probably created, other people could find some use in. Teachers pay teachers. I don't know if humane educators are using that very much, but that is a place where a lot of teachers are very interested in. They buy things for small amounts of money, but teachers can, interact with one another and get some cool stuff. So that might be something to consider. And Peace Learning Center, we do charge, but it's mostly to school corporations who are interested in doing the trainings. And so it's a very different feeling as a humane educator. I feel like we have to be like, over here, guys, this is really important too. And I feel like in social emotional learning world, it's people kind of knock your door down. And so I do think, though, if you can put that spin on your work as a humane educator, that this really helps, you know, pro-social behaviors, all these things that people want, that's a great way to all of a sudden people, you know, you go from being like, over here, guys, to like people paying you for your product. And so really thinking about the benefits. And I think people are really thinking about things in different ways now. So the way that you're marketing, the kind of work that you do, the world needs it, and don't undervalue yourself. This is a constant battle because I love giving away everything for free. And my coworkers are like, when we talk about negotiations, don't include Kristina because she will just give everything away. But there's something to even a small nominal fee, like $5 for a workshop. People show up and take it more seriously occasionally if you do that. I also like to always have a sliding scale because there's plenty of people who cannot afford that and you don't want to be exclusive. But if you do say, hey, if you can afford this, a lot of people do, and that could give you some income because it is really tough for a lot of organizations right now.
Adora and Maddie, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I can say the other side of it. I know someone asked, how are you doing this if you're not, if you are offering it for free? So our programming is all free when it comes to farm sanctuaries, humane education, just because we, you know, as far as having a guest speaker in the school or just having a guest speaker in general, schools tend to not have much of a budget when it comes to that. And we don't want, this content to be looked at as exclusive. We want everyone to have for it to be available to everyone. So that being said, I mean, it's definitely, we are relying on donors and our supporters at Farm Sanctuary. And we have, over the years, we've actually started to gather supporters who are specifically interested in humane education, which is amazing because in the last few years, you know, when we were first starting out, there was kind of this question of it. And more as we show what's going on and what teachers are saying and students are saying, we're getting that support that we need to continue this. So hopefully that's helpful.
Well, maybe it's different with the Collegio Medicos Veterinarios. It is a nonprofit organization, but this is actually a program that they adopted. So it's not actually like a shelter. You know, it's an organization for certified veterinarians. So it's a bit different than, you know, wanting when you work for a shelter that you have these you're spending on certain things. But as far as the Collegio, there's no charging involved, and it hasn't even been mentioned. I mean, for the summer camp, it was considered, but what we actually did was ask for a donation that was given to a rescue organization. You know, so the proceeds weren't even for the Collegio; they were for an organization that does spaying, neutering, and rescue work. So. And it was, I think, $10.
Okay. And then I know I've talked to a few of you who are actually attending tonight. There is a platform called OutSchool that was very popular over the summer for guardians and parents looking for good educational content to help keep the kids engaged, help them keep their learning. OutSchool is a place where you can teach either short live classes on a topic that you're qualified to discuss, or you can do pre-recorded content. And I haven't been a producer for them, but my nephews have taken some of the classes, and the students really like them. They really especially have enjoyed the live sessions where you might log on for 45 minutes to talk about a topic that's important, like maybe like photography of animals, or you know, writing a story about rescued animals or something like that. And you walk through all of that. You can set it up as a one-time class. You can set it up as a series, for example, like a series of 4 or 5, and the families pay a small amount for that. So if it's 5 classes, they might pay $60. You know, so that might be a way to get some income for yourself or for your organization. Right. So there have been a couple questions on this topic, and I know some of our presenters actually did touch on it, but I think it's good to ask it again. What are your favorite tips for making your virtual presentations feel interactive instead of just lecture?
Oh, it looks like I'm already unmuted. So I'll start. Yeah, so our presentations, as I said, for K through 4, we've got some art that's happening as we go along in the presentation. So how you'll actually see educators set up for those presentations is behind them is all like paper, and they can draw on that. We're usually using like a black marker for tracing and then chalk on brown paper, which shows up really well. Brainstorming what animals need to be happy and healthy, drawing those things out, or drawing out different ecosystems. So, and as much as we can, we try to interact with the students. Of course, when it's online, it kind of depends on if the teacher's like, I need to mute all my students for this presentation, and then they can ask you questions after, versus if the students, you know, are, you know, if they feel okay being able to unmute and mute themselves. With older students, that has been, as far what I've seen so far, is that that's been okay. And so I tend to stop after a certain point and ask for questions. There's also specific parts in the presentation where I am asking students for their input. What do they think? You know, what do animal farms and advertisements look like? You know, and then having them brainstorm that back to me. So as much as possible, just asking questions and trying to make it more conversational. But again, it's just, I think the thing about it is you need to be prepared for that to not be possible depending on the classroom and the teacher, how the teacher wants the presentation carried out. Because occasionally teachers are like, don't ask any questions, write down your questions, and they'll take them at the end. So you've just got to be ready for both, basically.
Yeah, I do a whole bunch of that sort of just trying to elicit whatever kind of communication. So one easy way to do that would just be like a visual sign. So I do a lot of voting, like let's just do this one now with the people who we can see your screen. How's your day going? 0, worst day of your life, 10, best day you've ever had. Show me right now, go. And then you just see, fingers and you just can know. But you can ask content questions. So, dare I say something like dogs are cuter than cats or something ridiculous that we know there's no such, you know, we don't believe in those binaries, but the up and down kind of votes, just something to like have some sort of two-way thing. Kahoot is really fun, K-A-H-O-O-T, for like quizzes. So if you have some content to go back and forth, that's really fun. My climate campers taught me about that. They called me grandma because I didn't know what it was. And the kids themselves led it for the other kids, and it was super fun. It was really a lot of fun. And you can use polls, and I really do like the chat box, so asking a question or two, and then finding ways. One of the ways that I've found it to just kind of call on people is I just say, you can always pass, but I'm going to call, and I give them an established order to reduce anxiety. So if you know you're going to be called third, but it's okay if you want to pass, and then I can just like give everybody a chance, because some learners, it's hard and anxiety producing to speak for a lot of learners on this kind of format. So really just kind of pulling it out of them. So I'm going to call on you, and if you want to pass, that's okay, but everybody's going to get a turn to share. So yeah, those are my tips.
So with the virtual presentations, we had a lot of polls. I haven't used that with Zoom, but with GoToMeetings, we would type in certain questions at a certain moment. Right, I have a baby that wants her mommy right now. So we would like interrupt and ask different kind of questions with the polls. With the smaller kids, like I mentioned before, I use a lot of animation in the PowerPoints. I've gotten to be an expert with that, you know, with highlighting certain images and making them go away or making them zoom out. Also hand signaling the answers. basically, asking a lot of questions like, like I mentioned before, can you touch this? Do you think it's okay to touch this dog? Yes or no, and they would answer, and then I would show them the signs. So making the slides look like they're actually interactive. I've seen kids actually touching the screen, thinking that they can, actually say which is the correct answer, but it keeps them, really going. And if you make it short, it's more likely that they're going to stay in tune until the end.
Okay. Did any of our attendees have any tips that they wanted to share? No? Okay, if not, I did see Brianna had her hand up. Did you still want to ask your question, Brianna?
I had it up, but then I just wrote it in the chat. It was to Maddie. It was a question about the art lessons and just seeing like, are these lessons where the students are following along and also doing that art project? And if so, like how those students get those art supplies? And she answered it.
Okay, great. And then I don't know how many of you are also following along with the chat, right? Because I know you want to stay engaged, but we did have a really great response from Katie about how they basically started to draw people in by offering the first year of their outreach for free, and then they began to charge for it. She also mentioned that it's a great way to get donors to give to the program and also then to apply for grants, because they know how much it will cost to go into the school. They'll know, for example, what their learning objectives that they're teaching, how many students they're reaching, things like that. And then they're asking for a gift to help that be free or reduced cost for the class. So classrooms can get sponsored. So thank you for sharing that, Katie. That's great. I think, let me see, is there another hand up? No. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the pre-submitted questions. There actually have been 2 or 3 questions that relate to this topic. How do you help the individuals, whether they're adults or whether they're youth, connect with animals if they can't actually meet any of the animals in person? And I know, for example, Maddie shared in her presentation about storytelling, but
I don't know if Maddie or Christina or Adora would like to jump in and chat about that.
I actually didn't hear it well because I think it froze. I don't know if it was my connection.
I think we were a bit frozen, but it sounds like the question has to do with just getting students to love animals without the animals being present. I can start that out since that is the basis of farm sanctuaries education. So I will say that traditionally, if you aren't familiar with our programming, we actually started out in each educator is based in a region, and we were going into schools. And we were going into schools with virtual reality. So after the presentation, students would actually put on VR goggles and take a virtual field trip to farm sanctuary. So that was one of the ways that tend to appeal, I would say, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, coolest thing in the world to them. So that was a piece of it that's, clearly right now not doable, but I think it's a good example. Storytelling is definitely where it's at for us. I mean, especially I think storytelling when you're talking about your own relationship with an animal. So we start out our presentations for 5th through 12th grade by talking about 2 of the farm animals that are important to us. So I talk about this sheep that, if anyone knows me at all, Ash sheep is my favorite animal on the planet. And I talk about how, what our relationship is like and how I was gone for a year and went back to visit him. And he immediately turned around when he heard my voice and came over, fell asleep on my lap. And then, after that, I have students writing on their sticky notes, tell Ash hi. I want to meet Ash. So they seem to pick up the most actually on the stories that have to do with us and our relationships with those animals. And then we do relate that back to our own animal companion. So I talk about how Ash isn't that different than my dog and 2 cats that I share my home with. So I think that's really powerful. Because of course, some of these stories were not relating back to, our relationship with that animal, but that seems to be a big one, especially for younger kids. They really want to kind of put themselves in your shoes, so to speak, and think of what it would be like to know Ash. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, the younger kids, the little kids, that it tends to be when a teacher's like, I wish you could have brought an animal in. But honestly, the little kids don't really seem to notice. I think it's more like teachers thinking that would be more exciting, but the students are pretty excited by what we're doing anyway. I mean, we're talking about animals. So if you can tell stories about animals, it's pretty exciting content.
Every pre-recorded video that I usually do, it's some kind of a tutorial. I'll have one of my pets there. And like I mentioned before, when we do the live presentations, the slideshows, I'll always present one of my pets. Like I have a lot, so there's a lot to talk about. But I've even noticed that they remember the pets that I had presented before. And if they see them again in a presentation, they say, oh, that was the one that you found in the car. So when you get them engaged with the story behind that pet, they're remembering, they're identifying that story with maybe one rescue that they have, and it just sticks to them. When we talk about the bite prevention, I use one of my dogs, so I'll talk about him, and I think that's the best way, just telling your stories. Why are they special to you? When they see them interact with other children, and it's just those natural videos that they're so personal that I think that's all you need, is that personal vibe, that like you were in the classroom.
Does anyone else have any tips they use, whether it's animal welfare education, human rights education, environmental content? Storytelling is hugely powerful, and I love that the students are connecting also personally with you, because let's face it, educators are what's served at dinner every night, right? They talk about you, they talk about what you do, so it's great they can form a connection. Right, we have time for maybe one more question. I realize we're just pushing our hour and a half already, and the last question, there's been 2 that came through related to this. Have you been getting pushback from people who do not want children to be online anymore? And if yes, how do you handle that?
I'll just respond and say we haven't. For the most part, we're having actually a lot of parents reach out and want to schedule presentations, which we're when we're supposed to be doing classroom. So there's a ton of demand, I think, right now for programming like this, especially when it has to do with animals. So yeah, we haven't been seeing that. I guess if it's happening, they'd have to go to the teachers themselves, but that's just kind of what we're dealing with right now. So there's not a whole lot that can be done about it.
Yeah, we've had some campers whose parents were just like, I don't think it's going to be a good fit. And that was the worst of the negative feedback. Most people were glad to send their kids. And yeah, we've had the same, like, parents, they're hungry for their kids to reconnect with something they care about. And so I think they're like, well, if it's got to be virtual, let's do that anyway. And so I think both parents and teachers are understanding, let's connect kids with good, positive programming, and it's worth it.
Okay, we had one question. Anna asked about favorite shortcut tips. I think that's a good way to end because none of us have enough time. So what, for the three presenters, are your favorite tips that you have been using as shortcuts? And Anna, if I am misinterpreting your question, you just jump right in.
I'm actually wondering what exactly that means. Like, can you give an example?
Sure. I would say, like, I typed this earlier, but so I joined a Facebook group on the Bitmoji craze. So much easier because a lot of the teachers let you copy their slides. They made them public.
Oh, okay.
And that saved me a lot of little time because I really just wanted to start building this, online little world. And I needed a jumping off point where you could click on the picture of a book and see somebody else's reading, which is something I did. I didn't necessarily do every video myself. I was like, check out this video of a kid who trained his rats to do awesome tricks, So
Sure.
I didn't want to do everything personally because I can't. I don't. I mean, I could, but I can't have. I just don't have the time to manage it. So I needed this little jumping off point. So that's my shortcut, is that I cheated and totally stole people's Bitmoji classrooms and then just altered them a little bit and added like my animals. So, that was mine.
Got it. Yeah, I feel like my shortcuts are a little different because for me, what I'm doing a lot of right now is scheduling the presentations for all the educators. So I have like written out emails for each type of presentation, exactly what we need to know. Like one of my questions earlier was, how do you make sure the kids are prepared with paper and writing utensils? This is like, I have when scheduling, right before the presentation, after the presentation. So like a very systematic way of kind of handling all of that. But that's a little different than the content. There isn't really a systematic way that we create the content for our presentations. It's definitely a bit more of a process, I would say.
The only, I can't come up with a really specific one, but I've had to, with Heart, we're doing a whole lot of video production and doing all kinds of videos. And so I've had to sort of become like a video editor, and I am really not great with technology. I'll go ahead and tell you guys that now at the end of this, that that's not my strong point. Surprise. And I just search YouTube for very specific things. So if I'm using one program and I just say, how do you splice, and then it just tells me and it shows me on YouTube, which just helps a gal like me who is not necessarily native to all of this technology. So, yeah.
Well, I guess a shortcut that I've been using is I take, like if I'm going to give the same material, the same topic, so I'll take the presentation that I already had and put it, and you record the slides as if they were a picture, and you can put them in a video editor, put music on it, and do a voiceover. So you can, if you don't have a way to record a presentation, like you're talking, then you can just take the slides and put them in a video editor. At least that's helped me a lot, because just putting on a slideshow isn't really fun. It doesn't explain much. So putting it in the video editor with some music on it and a voiceover to explain it worked pretty well.
You're muted, Stephanie.
Thanks. So we are slightly over our 90 minutes. I want to once again thank our amazing presenters. So thank you to Adora, to Maddie, to Christina, and thank you to all of our amazing attendees. I think we could stay on here probably for another hour and a half, sharing ideas and figuring out, where we're all going with this. So this is just the first in our APL and HEC Roundtable series. We can definitely continue this conversation in the Humane Education Coalition Facebook Partners group. So if there's questions that you have, please go ahead and type them in. Like if you're dying to have something answered and we didn't get there, go to our HEC Partners Facebook group. We also are planning future events, so please stay tuned for the upcoming opportunities. And we would like your input regarding topics you'd like to explore. So if you have some interest in various topics, please feel free to email us, to put it on the Facebook page. Just reach out to me personally if you'd like. And we definitely appreciate all of you. We also ask for your support so we can continue to do these things with the Humane Education Coalition. So please consider making a donation today or in the future to HEC. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work with everything you're doing in humane education. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.